Number 1. The Coliseum gates rumbled open, the crowd roared, and Thomas walked out into the sun-drenched arena once again. Although they greeted him like a hero, the crowd was stuff of nightmares, an assemblage of creatures from the empire that had conquered Earth, here to witness today's battle. But the monstrous spectators no longer intimidated Thomas. They were as unimportant as the seats they sat upon, and their howls and screeches might as well have been jeers rather than cheers. Today, all he noticed was that their noise was more deafening than usual, as if a hurricane had been bottled up inside the massive Coliseum. Then, the gnats arrived to distract him. He still called them gnats, though by now he understood that they were really just impossibly small video devices. The swarms annoyed him each time he fought, but he restrained the instinct to swat at them, since dozens more would simply replace any he hit. From the gnats, he had pieced together that the death matches, which the Earth's new rulers had set up for their own entertainment, were being broadcast across the galaxy. For all he knew, he might be some kind of galactic superstar, possibly the most famous human who ever lived. But what did he care? The invaders had killed millions, perhaps billions, including everyone he loved. They had broken him long ago. Now, he was just a slave pitted against his fellow slaves. Kill or be killed was all that mattered. Suddenly, the gnats parted, and Thomas faced his latest opponent, a woman. He wasn't surprised. The female combatants were as fierce as the males, and often quicker. Any old-fashioned notion of chivalry within Thomas had vanished the first time it almost got him killed. This woman was tall, lean, and as scarred as he was, and while it was entirely possible that she had been a kindergarten teacher before the invasion, her presence here meant only one thing for certain. She was deadly. Plus, she'd chosen knives. He hated knives. And then with a cry, she sprang at him, and the battle began. What followed was 20 minutes of feinting and dodging, slashing and clashing, but in the end, Thomas spilled her intestines on the ground. It was close enough to watch her eyes soften as her savagery drained away, along with her life. "Good luck," she said. The crowd erupted, cannons boomed, a robot scuttled out to lift its arms in the air. Apparently, he had won some new ranking. And then, they set him free. Thomas was stunned. No more prison cell, no more Coliseum. The invaders simply picked up and departed, perhaps to amuse themselves on some other planet. After being enslaved so long, Thomas wondered if his world's survivors would greet him as a champion or a traitor. Instead, what greeted him were ruins and memories. The two words echoing over and over in his mind. Good luck. 2 words, spoken by the second to last human in the universe. Number 2. Field trip. And if you look to your left, you'll see the field where the battle occurred. Mr. Hamilton's 6th grade class shuffled to a stop and gazed dutifully across the empty field. The guide's words droned in the late autumn sun like a sleepy bumblebee among the weeds. A red-tailed hawk circled overhead. Calvin watched the hawk until it dipped out of sight. He began idly digging the toe of his sneaker into the dirt at the edge of the trail. A turning point of the war. We must never forget the brave sacrifices these thousands of men and women. A gleam of light from the dust captured Calvin's attention. He bent down to examine it more closely. Last-ditch effort, an uprising of citizens armed with only whatever weapons they could scavenge. Calvin picked up a stick and scraped at the hard, dry dirt. The outline of eye sockets and a nose hole emerged from the ground. Bravely marched forth against the unholy horde. Calvin barely heard the guide's voice. He used the stick to loosen the packed earth from the skull's empty eyes, the gaping jaws. He wasn't quite ready to share his discovery with anyone. Once he told, it would no longer be his. It would be gathered by the historical committee on the Great War and labeled and placed on a shelf somewhere. For now, it was his own private knowledge. His secret. He stuck his fingers in between the yawning jaws to scoop it out of the dirt he had loosened. The jaw snapped shut like a bear trap. Calvin gasped loudly and snatched his hand back. A few kids turned and looked at him with mild curiosity. He stood up quickly, stuffing his hands into his pockets. They turned back to the guide and his tired lecture. Thanks to their heroic deeds on this battlefield 100 years ago, today we are free from the zombie scourge. But we must remain ever vigilant to ensure that such horrors never happen again. Our next stop on the tour is the excavation center, where we will learn how artifacts are safely collected from the battle site. The class trudged off behind the guide, feet crunching on dry leaves. Calvin kept his hands shoved deep in his pockets. A trickle of blood ran from his fingers. He tried to ignore the growing tingling sensation creeping up his arm. The red-tailed hawk was back. It gave a thin, lonely screech as it circled high in the crisp blue sky. Number 3. 8 legs in frequency. Mr. Savid, the operation was a complete success. My eyes fluttered open, sucking the light out of the room. 6 new portals had appeared in front of my face. The first thing I noticed was that my mouth was drier than a desert caught in open sun. The second thing, the addition of the 4 new stubby limbs on each side of my torso. The third, I was a bit peckish. Reaching my arms behind my head, I stretched and cracked the sleep-stilled joints. My new nubs stretched alongside, waving in little circles. I tried to keep my excitement muted, but my face split open a wide grin. I brought a hazy hand up to feel the rigid, jutting bones now forming my sharp chelicera. Oozing with saliva, they flexed and retracted back into my jawbone. Stiff, short black hairs covered every visible inch of my skin. Through them, I could see more of my surroundings than my eyes had ever shown. It was all I could to not spill silk right then and there. Aftercare instructions given, I returned home. I felt like I was experiencing the world for the first time. I could taste a million notions on the wind, and my infant limbs skittered happily underneath my coat. Sleep came easily, drugs still coursing through my system, dropping hints of morphine at random intervals. However, when I awoke, I felt myself paralyzed by an unknown hand. My entire body was slick with sweat. Reaching my hand between my thighs, I found my spinneret, a turgid mess, blood and silk. The doctor had said this might happen for a week or so. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, trying to hold in the rest of the web threatening to come out. Then, I heard them. Tiny, angry voices, barely over a harsh whisper, but 1,000 strong. The words flooded at me from all directions, tiny white-hot beads of anger bleeding into darkness. I spun in a circle, seeing nothing. Was I still feeling the drugs? It couldn't be. Caught in a haze of confusion, I didn't feel the tickle on the back of my hand until feathery touch became needle sting. I subconsciously slapped at it, feeling a small, hard crunch against my skin. Lifting my palm, I was greeted by a crushed, black body and 8 twitching, dying legs. Like a storm, the whispers rose up, becoming a howling scream. It was then that my newfound vision focused in on the shadows, that I saw past the dust motes clinging to my ceiling fan, and between the slats in my closet and beneath my dresser. It was then that I saw, reflected back at me, thousands of glittery, Stygian jewels, filled with visions of my bursting flesh and white fangs begging for the privilege. The drooling womb between my legs popped and leaked as the cluster of my new kin swelled into a mass around me. Number 4. Footsteps outside. Watching the rain run its course down the window while basking in the warmth of the fireplace was one of my favorite activities. I was so absorbed, tracking the seamlessly random trails of water, that I didn't hear the footsteps right outside. They were faint, but unmistakable. I quickly made distance between the window, with my back to the fireplace, while the footsteps came closer and closer. Despite the rain and dusk, I still had enough light to see my unwanted visitor. Without pausing, or even a hint of hesitation, it turned its head towards me. I met a face with leather-like skin, peppered with beige freckles. The thing's eyes were wet plums that were nestled deep inside sunken eye sockets. I could only stand in terror as it reached up and slightly tapped the window glass with long fingers that tapered into thick yellow nails. It slowly dragged its hand down the wet glass that sighed gently in protest. Before I could scream, before I could drop to my knees, before I could beg God to save me, the thing started to climb. I stood frozen at how quickly and effortlessly it climbed. First one long gangly arm, and then the other. Its legs didn't stray far behind, as they pushed and gripped onto anything it could get a hold of. In a flash it was gone and above me. The only evidence of its existence was the occasional plunge from looking for another foothold. I didn't understand why the creature hadn't tried to break the glass, but I quickly realized it didn't have the strength to. It didn't want to break its way in. It climbed through the chimney. I turned and stared dumbfounded at the fireplace as small black particles of soot danced wildly while drifting down. More and more soot rained down, and the fire struggled to stay lit. In a few moments, it wouldn't be on, and I would be alone in the dark with the monster. Moments later, I heard a voice that reminded me of the wind when it whistled between the tree branches. What sent shivers down my spine was its message. Let me in. I'm scared. If you like these stories, be sure to check out the author's pages, which I'll link to in the description. And if you like my videos and the music I compose, be sure to like and subscribe so I can spend more time creating narrations and music for you. Have a good night.